Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I really do appreciate you being here today. I'm going to echo what Katie said, whether you drove, swam, canoed. Houstonians always find a way to make it work, don't we? We're very resilient. I want to thank the Hope and Healing Center for having me. Cody Weiss is the person that he asked me all the different things I spoke about when we talked about me coming back here. I've spoken before and done a couple of lunch and learns. And when I mentioned the high conflict piece, he said, okay, that one. And but wow, was he right. And so I just am really grateful. But I also just want to take a minute and start our conversation by showing you that, because you probably expected people fighting. So I'm going to give you this instead. And just ask you to take a moment and be proud of yourself for being here. It takes courage to deal with people that have conflict. It takes courage to know that we need to learn new skills. And it's hard sometimes. Some of you are here today because you just have a situation, or you know that when other people get upset, you get upset too, because emotions are contagious. Some of you are here today because there's a particular person, maybe someone you really love or care about, and you can tell they're struggling and you just don't know what to do. Or maybe there's somebody at work that's driving you crazy and your work is important to you. And then some of you are here today because there's some particular person that perhaps you don't love, but you have to deal with, and they have caused you a lot of pain and grief. So for whatever reason you are here today, I honor you. I honor your willingness to be here, your maturity to have emotional insight and awareness, and your willingness to learn new things, because that is really what it's all about in this journey we call life, right? And so I just want you to take a minute, enjoy the scenery. But today is all about you. It's all about what you can do and how you can move forward so that you can have peace of mind and feel like you know what you're doing the next time that person, that situation, or any situation comes up where someone you're dealing with gets really upset. Then you'll know what to do, and that's a great feeling. So we are going to be taking questions, and I have a number of slides, but I'm going to kind of move through them pretty fast. It's the same way I do my therapy. I'm very much a solution-focused therapist, and I have not been doing therapy for 20 years. My professional journey has been much like my own life. I didn't go back to graduate school till I was 48. That was in 2012. And so I've spent a lot of time on the other side of the couch, I'm not ashamed to say. And so as a result, when I work with my clients, I often say to them, look, you've thought and thought and thought about this, and you've talked and talked and talked about this. And most of the time people come to see me because they want to know what to do. Because that's how I was. When I went to see people, I wanted to know what to do. And it's not that I'm going to tell you what to do, but I'm going to give you some paths and some suggestions, and then you can decide what's right for you. Each of us is different. We have different situations. We have different personalities. We have different temperaments. But I'm going to give you a particular strategy to work with, but some different ideas, and then you will pick what's right for you. And that's what's important. So today we're going to talk about the underlying dynamics of high conflict people. We're going to talk about this high conflict cycle, which actually is kind of a cycle that happens, I think, a lot of time just when we're dealing with people that get upset. We're going to identify some very specific strategies that work and create an action plan, because it is the doing that empowers us. The talking and the thinking tend to take up our time and drain us, but it's the doing that helps us to feel better, and that's where we want you to go. Now, when I was growing up, I was told a number of things that were pretty accurate about dealing with conflict in general, or dealing with people that were causing me grief. One of them was about speaking up, right? Using my voice. And this is important. I was also told, put down your boundaries, right? Sometimes you just have to tell people no. And then in my step-family and single-parent life, I was often given these very same pieces of advice. And if you'll just be reasonable and compromise, I'm sure they're going to work with you. But I have to tell you that when you are actually dealing with a true high conflict person, not a one of these things is helpful. And maybe some of you have had the exact same experience that I had. You put down boundaries, they just ignore them. When you speak up, it just makes it worse. In fact, sometimes it can make you a target. Apologize and move on. Sometimes the more you apologize, the worse it gets. Instead of I'm sorry, they say, well, you should be sorry. Or I'm sorry, well, you don't really mean it. And so a lot of things that are kind of the typical thing that we are told by therapists, or we are told by friends, or we are told by family members with the very best of intentions, and that ought to work, don't work. And so then we spend a whole lot of time and a whole lot of effort thinking and reading books and talking to people and trying to figure out this crazy stuff. And everybody's with me on that one? Yeah, okay. So high conflict dynamics. So I told you we're going to get right to it, right? So high conflict dynamics. So anybody can be high conflict in certain situations. We can all be high conflict. We can all get upset or overreact at any point in time. I mean, you know, I'm right there with you on that one. I hold no prize. I am not the calmest person in the world. I have kind of a very high energy personality, as you all can tell. And so, you know, we're all different. So this is not about being perfect. This is not about being calm. This is about just understanding that we all have some emotional times and everything. And so it's always okay to mess up and go back and say, gosh, I really wish I hadn't done that. But high conflict people do have particular traits. And the other thing about high conflict dynamics is that oftentimes you get hooked. So the dynamic just goes over and over and over again. So today we want to help you get unhooked. You get sucked in. We want to help you step away and not get sucked in. The other thing about high conflict dynamics is that oftentimes the inference is that both people want to fight. And the other thing that I've learned is that most people don't want to fight. I don't want to fight. And oftentimes you'll find that high conflict people, they want to fight. And I find that even while some people do want to stand your ground, that at some point you don't even care about the ground. You just want peace. And so most people who want to stop these dynamics are really peacemakers. I want to have a voice, but you know, ultimately I just want peace. I just want to be able to figure out a way to move on from this. So once again, good, kind, loving, caring people who are trying to figure out the best way to move forward. So high conflict people have some very specific traits. Now, Cody has very graciously handed out to you this form, this yellow sheet. And the reason I do it this way is for a couple of reasons. Some people learn by writing. Some people learn by looking. Some people learn by listening. And I think I mentioned to you, and gosh, did I not? Let me go all the way back here. They're going to love this on the video. So questions today. So we're going to do some questions today. And when we do these questions, some of you have some very delicate situations, and we want to be respectful of that. So we had a bowl out at the front that had cards on it. So if you put your situation on there, I'm just going to read those out if depending upon the time that we have, and try to answer some of those questions so that you don't have to stand up and raise your hand. But some of you might want to stand up and raise your hand. That's fine too. But we're going to get to as many questions as you can. After this is over today, I have some resources I'd love to share with you. There's an article I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to do an overview of everything that's on the PowerPoint. And then I have some additional resources I would love to provide you with. So I have these 2 green sheets, and I'm going to pass one out here. And then I'm going to have one up here. If you're someone that doesn't want your name passed out, that's fine. And if you just want to give me your email address and your name, please try to make it as clean as you can, and that's kind of the pot calling the kettle black, because I am not the best writer in the world. But then I'd be happy to email that to you privately. I have a wonderful intake and scheduling coordinator, Courtney, and she may be helping me with that. Or you can just email me directly at jayna@thebridgeacross.com, and I would love to send you those resources. If it's not today, you can send it to me in the next few days, and I'd be happy to do that. So while I'm giving you today, I'm kind of allowing you to kind of write down what's important to you. I'm happy to provide you with that information. Okay, so now I'm going to go forward to here. So sometimes we talk about high conflict dynamics in terms of both people wanting to fight, but you know what? I find a lot of times it's just one person. A lot of times One person really does want to get along, and they keep trying to figure out ways to do it, but it just doesn't work. So high conflict dynamics is not always about two people. Here's what I do think happens, though. I do think that what happens is when you are dealing with someone that's high conflict, it's crazy making. They make you feel crazy, and they make you feel defensive. And so then you get really defensive, and the more defensive you get, then the more upset they get. And so before long, you both do look a little crazy. So part of what we're going to be talking about today is how you avoid that piece, and that's that high conflict dynamic. So now we're back to traits. So high conflict people have some very specific traits, and I always love talking about this, and you're going to say, why? Because when I first heard this, I went, And every time I talk to children and parents and other people about these traits, they go, because it's so helpful to have it put in concrete form. So Bill Eddy is with the High Conflict Institute, and he is the one that put together this list of traits for high conflict people. And it is so accurate, and I'm sure that none of you know anyone like this, but maybe you know someone that knows someone like this. So first we have all or nothing thinking. And that is people see situations or people as all good or all bad. There is no gray. Second, we have unmanaged emotions. So it's the craziness of pitching the fit. It's the 50 texts. It's the 20 phone calls. It's the 80 emails. It's the punching the walls. It's the screaming, the yelling, the shouting on a regular basis. Anything that shows this unmanaged emotions. Extreme behaviors, same thing. And then, of course, the other thing that really hallmarks a high conflict person is they blame others for everything. High conflict people at their root never, ever, ever take responsibility for anything. And this is the part that is the most difficult. Now, I do believe that there are some people that are simply high conflict in certain areas. So for instance, today politically, a lot of people are kind of high conflict. They see one party as all good and one party as all bad. In religion, some people are high conflict. They see certain things as all good and certain things as all bad. But the idea, though, is that for high conflict people, they are always like this. Now, the other thing about high conflict people that sets them apart is they have targets of blame. So because they blame others for everything, then they have to blame someone specifically. And high conflict people will come up against people that they then will target, as it's always this person's fault. And unfortunately, this becomes true for particular people. So if you are the adult son or daughter of a high conflict person, if you are the adult mother or father or mother-in-law or father-in-law, if you are the partner of a high conflict person, if you are the ex of a high conflict person, then what will end up happening is you will be, or you can end up being, a target of blame for that person. It's a very difficult place to be. The other thing about high conflict people is that they are the masters of triangulation. It's never enough just to be unhappy with you. They will go out and seek others to justify what's going on. And as a result, they create something called negative advocates. And in my own life, I had a vast and wide experience with negative advocates. And this is particularly painful because then you're not only defending yourself to this person, but you end up having to defend yourself to other people. And it's hard. Now, a lot of times with high conflict people, especially in my line of work, and I do primarily work with single parents and step families. I certainly work with people in nuclear families, but often people will come to me and say, well, my ex is a narcissist, or my whatever is a borderline. Well, so high conflict people may or may not have personality disorders. But we're not going to talk about that today, because today we're here to talk about you. So some of these people do, some don't. But people with personality disorders, not all people have these qualities. Does that make sense? But all high conflict people have these qualities. Okay? All right. So with Bill Eddy's work, and so I'm a licensed provider for something called New Ways for Families, which is for parents that are divorced, And there are skills we teach co-parents and skills that I work with families and children in these families on teaching these children, which build resilience and help combat conflict. And so if you think about it this way, remember we talked about how when high conflict people are doing their craziness, it makes you crazy, right? It makes you defensive. It makes you reactive. So the goal then is, one of the ways that we combat this is we want to be the opposite. And it took me and my husband a long time to figure this piece out. But the goal is to be the opposite. So if these are high conflict traits, then the goal is to have flexible thinking. People are not all good or all bad. All people have some good things and some things that are going to drive you crazy. As I say to the children that I see in my practice, all parents have some good things and some things that are going to drive you crazy. And the kids will all go, yep. And all children have some good things and some things that are going to drive you crazy. And all children go, yep. And moderate behaviors. We want to avoid extremes. We want to figure out how to manage ourselves, managed emotions. And then taking responsibility for yourself, checking in. What's going on with me? Am I having a hard time today? Am I not feeling good today? What's going on with me? Does this make sense to everybody? So the more you do this, the more you set yourself apart from the person that's making you crazy, but also you set yourself apart for other people. So sometimes in a family, especially a big family, a high conflict person will start getting negative advocates together. See, so-and-so's doing all this. But if you can maintain your composure, you're going to look a lot less crazy. That person will have a lot less power. So when I talk about flexible thinking, this is one of the things I use, and so I'm going to work on it with you today. So who sees in this picture the young woman? Raise your hand. And who sees in this picture the old woman? Right. So there's actually two people in this picture. There's a young woman, and there's an old woman. This is much of what it's like in life when you have two people that have different perspectives. Is it true that there's no old woman, only a young woman? No. Is it true that there's only a young woman, only an old woman? No. Each person in a relationship has two perspectives. And the truth is that you both have your own perspectives. There is no right and wrong. And oftentimes in relationships, we try to say, I was right and you were wrong, or you were wrong and or you were right. And there is no such thing. And with parents of children who are divorced, it's your mom's not right, your dad's wrong, your dad's not right, your mom's wrong. It's both parents have their own perspective, and you have your perspective, and it's okay. It's not, you don't have to choose. You just have to honor it. Make sense? So that's flexible thinking. That's how it works. So you don't have to always justify your position. You can just be a flexible thinker. So in the high conflict cycle itself, it has 3 stages. So the first stage is the mistaken assessment of danger. And you notice the word is mistaken. I think oftentimes people that are high conflict, they are mistaken. The way their operating system works, it's not like the way our operating system works. And so they will often see danger where there is none. But danger, if you think about that, it means unsafe. It means unsafe. And so it means they're not getting the attention they want, they don't feel respected, they don't feel loved, they don't feel whatever that is, right? Whatever unsafe means to that person. And oftentimes we don't know what it means, but the acronym for that is MAD. And then that person, because they feel unsafe, then they have behavior that's aggressively defensive. And the acronym for that is BAD. And so that's like, you send an email to somebody or a text to somebody and you're like, hey, I can't make it to this thing. And you get back this text and it's like, I can't believe you're not coming tonight. You never do things I want to do. You're always blah, 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 blah. And you're like, whoa, what's going on? So mad to bad. And then what happens is so the high conflict person, or the person who's upset, because sometimes maybe they're not a high conflict person, they're just a person that's upset. They do these 2 things, and here's this next one. Now, when someone does that to us, what is our natural response? Our natural response is to say, well, wait a second, I didn't do anything wrong, or you're getting too upset, or what's the matter with you, or whatever. In fact, we have some examples here of negative feedback. So I'm going to give you a hint here, and I want you to hear me. Do not ever, ever, ever say to someone that you think is high conflict, you are a high conflict person. This would be a bad idea. The second thing that's hardly ever, ever, ever helpful when anybody gets upset, like anybody for any reason, is to tell them to calm down. I heard this recently, and I don't remember who I heard it from. I know it in my head to be true, but don't tell people to calm down. When I'm in my office and people get upset, I usually say, it's okay. It's okay. Let's just take a minute here. Or, gosh, that makes sense to me, you're upset. Like, I just try to find a way to validate it that sounds genuine, right? But don't ever say this, you're a high conflict person. But these are all the ways that high conflict people see negative feedback. Now, you may not see these things as negative feedback, but a high conflict person or someone that's upset. So remember, sometimes we can all be high conflict, right? So anybody that's upset, they're going to see it this way. So even advice. So if you turn around and say to them, well, if you would just plan better, or, well, if you'll just do this and this and this, it'll be okay. And that makes them matter, right? We don't want people to give us advice when we're upset. I don't really like advice when I'm upset. Ignoring them. So this is a big one. A lot of times, that person's upset, just ignore them. High conflict people do not like to be ignored. In fact, sometimes their unsafe thing is that they don't get enough attention. So if you ignore them, they will pursue you more. A negative tone, so any sort of negative tone. And then these nonverbals, eye rolling, upset or angry looks, anything that makes them feel unsafe. So this is the high conflict cycle. And so then what happens is you give them negative feedback, or we give them negative feedback, or someone gives them negative feedback, and then what does that do for them? Right back to their mistaken assessment of danger. And that is how the high conflict cycle works. So what do you think we got to do in order to stop this cycle? Anybody? Huh? Stop the negative feedback. So in my training with the Integrative Attachment and Trauma Protocol, we talk about pulling a domino. So you know how you line up a thing of dominoes? I talk about this with kids all the time. You line up the dominoes, if you push the first domino, they all roll down, right? Well, when you pull the domino, what happens? They don't all roll down. So pulling the domino means figuring out that one thing that you can do that stops the whole thing. And so that's what we want to do. Now, Bill Eddy, back to lovely Bill Eddy, wonderful guy, the High Conflict Institute, he says you use something called EAR. EAR stands for empathy, attention, and respect. And he says when you use these things, empathy, attention, and respect, there are two things that happen here. One is you are no longer giving negative feedback. And two, you are then assisting this person in not feeling endangered. And I will tell you that, so one of the articles I'm going to send you if you sign up for the resources is an article by Bill Eddy called Calming Upset People with EAR, and it gives you a list of different statements that you can use. But it's a wonderful thing, and EAR alone is incredibly helpful. If you have a teenager at home who's always getting upset with you, if you will start using EAR, it's amazing. And I know it works because I'm the person that calls up a customer service agent and I'm irritated about something, and if they tell me to calm down or don't raise my voice, that just makes me madder. But when they will say to me, gosh, you sound really upset, let me see if I can help you, that just immediately makes me feel better, right? I mean, it works. And what I suggest that people do, and we'll talk about this in a minute, is pick one statement from EAR, from empathy, attention, and respect, and memorize it. Text it to yourself, put it in your car, but come up with 1 or 2 or 3 statements that you can always use and start using them. Practice. Practice on your friends, practice on your mother, practice on your husband or your wife, practice. So a couple of mine that I like to use, as far as empathy goes. Now, the one thing about these three statements is you do not want to say them in a fake way, because high conflict people can smell that more than anything. So, for example, empathy. So you don't want to say, I'm sorry, but you might say, I hate it that you're upset, because that may actually be true. Or, I can see that you're upset. I see that you're upset. Or, attention. You have my attention, and I want to work this out with you. I want to figure this out with you. You're important to me. That may be true if this is a loved one. Respect. I respect how much you mean to me. I respect the effort you put into this. I respect that that this is important to you. There are all sorts of ways that you can make statements that are truthful, that are also show ear. That makes sense? Okay. So sometimes people will say, well, why do I have to be the one to change? And I get this a lot. Why do I have to be the one that changes? I don't want to change. I'm not the one with the problem. It's their fault. You're right. It is their fault. You shouldn't have to change. But here's the thing. It is the only way you get any control and power. It is the only way that you get to do it, that you get to make changes. And I'm sorry. So I spent half the session telling them how sorry I am. Because I am. I hate it. I hate it that people have to learn things that they don't want to learn. But I think a lot of life is like that. And you have control over it, and you get to choose. So you get to decide if you want to keep being miserable or if you want to take some control here and do something different. You get to have choices. With parents, I often say, well, I don't know, what do you want to model to your children? Do you want to model to your children that you're just going to be a victim, or do you want to model to your children that you get to have choices and you get to make decisions over the kind of person that you want to be, or you just want to keep fighting? And no matter how unfair it is, I will tell you this, I have had to learn a lot of things that I did not want to learn. I don't want to learn those things. I would have happily signed up for a bunch of other things to learn. But having learned them, I will tell you that they've come in handy, right? And they've made me a better partner. They've made me a better mother. They've made me a better friend. I'm better. I'm better. And so sometimes I have to drag people kicking and screaming to this reality. But I will tell you that it is a good feeling the first time you learn those ear statements and you do it and you get some result, you just pat yourself on the back. It's okay. So moving on. Steps to a strategy. So, the first thing about working with anybody that's difficult or anybody that always gets upset with you or anybody that you have these problems with is to stop being surprised. Now, I find that good, kind, loving people are always surprised because they just cannot imagine why someone treats them that way. They just keep thinking that somehow this is going to change. They just don't understand it. And so even though they know in their head this person is like this or this situation may be like this, they still somehow have an underlying expectation that it's just going to be this way. So the first thing we have to do is stop being surprised. This person is just like that. It's not about you. It's not your fault if you're their parent. There's just all sorts of reasons why people are like this. Sometimes it has to do with mental health issues. Sometimes it has to do with life choices. High conflict people sometimes have childhood trauma. There's all sorts of things. But the bottom line is you can't be responsible for them. So stop being surprised. So lower your expectations and lower them again. They're going to do it. Now, sometimes we get sad about that. Sometimes acknowledging that they're going to do it again is hard. But what I tell people is it's okay, because the thing is, once we lower our expectation, then it's actually better, because then we can plan. Then we stop being surprised, And so then we can start with minimizing. So the thing about minimizing is when you have a high conflict person, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. We think about them, we talk about them, we're afraid of them, we worry about them, we get whatever, and so we want to minimize them. So I work with people like come up with a silly name, come up with a cartoon character, come up with a, like I have people, there's the Roadrunner, blah, 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 there's, what Squidward is in SpongeBob, somebody uses that. I have some exes, they have sweet little names like LFW, LFH for lunatic first wife, lunatic first husband. Come on, you got to have a sense of humor about this stuff. But the point is, you come up with some silly name for that person. You make them not so scary. Does that make sense? We're not trying to be disrespectful, but we're trying to help you understand that that person is just doing a lot of crazy stuff, and we need to stop making them this big, bad, horrible thing. Minimize. Come up with a phrase. There they go again. There's that text message again. There's that email again. There's those 50 phone calls again. There they are. They're going to happen again. It's okay. It doesn't have to be the worst thing in the world. Because when you stop getting upset, then it gets easier for you to stop reacting. And limit your talking time. Like, don't talk about them all the time, and don't think about them all the time. Because this is how they mess with your peace of mind. It's how they mess with your brain. They live rent-free in your head. Anybody ever heard that expression? That's what that means. They're living in there. And literally 10 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day. I work with people on limiting the amount of time they think about them and talk about them. Live your life. Focus on your stuff. Okay. So the second thing is you want to look for patterns. Is there a certain topic that always lends itself to a fight? Do they always fight only in person or only by email and text? Is there a certain time of day or night? Oftentimes we fight at night because people are tired. I tell husbands and wives or partners, don't fight. Don't have fights after 9 p.m. Just don't. Stop. Just agree to table it until the next day. A lot of things look a lot better in the morning. Is it only in a certain context? Are there any exceptions? Are there times when you don't fight? Because what I find is that there are almost always patterns. Conflict almost always has patterns. Look for the patterns. You're like a detective. You know the old detective shows, Mannix, and see this, I'm showing my age, Mannix and Kojak, and I just love detective shows. You're being a detective. And then create your plan. So first, you got to figure out how to take care of yourself. And so there's a couple different ways of taking care of yourself. Staying calm, right? You're staying calm for you, because if you can stay calm, then maybe they will, maybe not. We basically, in our brain, have a thinking brain and a feeling brain. The front part of our brain is our thinking brain. The back part of our head is where our feeling brain is, our amygdala is. And when our feeling brain goes crazy, our thinking brain just shuts down. I talk with teenagers about this all the time. It's like anger makes you stupid. They get it. Yeah, you're right. I said that thing to my mom and I shouldn't have. Yeah. And then there's a couple of other ways to think about it. Dan Siegel talks about the window of tolerance. Staying in the window of tolerance when you can think and feel at the same time. Another way is Dan Siegel's hand puppet. And I'll give you this handout in one of the resources. Your brainstem is here that operates all the automatic parts of your body. Your amygdala is here, which is all your emotional memories. Your thinking brain is here. And when you get upset and you get so mad, you flip your lid. Your thinking brain is gone, and all that's left is your emotions. Another way to look at it is the elephant and the rider. If you've ever heard this example, Jonathan Haidt, who does happiness hypothesis. The rider is our rational side, the elephant is our emotional side, and we are riding the elephant. Can we keep the elephant under control? So when I say I give you these 3 different examples, so you pick the one that resonates with you. I got to keep my elephant intact, right? Or I don't want to flip my lid, or I want to stay in the window. Whatever works for you to help you to be calm. Use your ear statements. Another one is have time to respond or create a response in advance. So a lot of times the reason why we don't respond well to high conflict people is they catch us off guard. So not only because we keep being surprised, but also because they text us at like just the wrong time. So one of the things that I would say to you is have a prepared statement. Gosh, thank you so much for your note. I am in the middle of a meeting, but I will get back to you as soon as I can this evening. Like, give them attention, right? That would be an attention statement. You're important to me, and I want to respond to this. And it's okay to say that every single time they text you. It's okay. And I'm going to give you an example in a minute of someone that did that. But buy yourself some time. It's okay to put a pause on it. In this day and age of emails and texts, I mean, the written word is dangerous. No offense, it's dangerous. Because people do not see the written word the way you wrote it. They see the written word the way they read it. If they're in a bad mood, you're dead. It's all bad. And I learned that the hard way, like back in 2002 or something. I sent an email out. I was VP of room moms at the elementary school, and this mom got so mad at me because she didn't like my email. And I was like, I was just like putting an email together. I think she's still mad at me. Okay, so experiment if needed. So remember, be a detective. Be a detective. Try this, try that. So it's not what you say, it is how you say it. And nobody taught me this when I was growing up. It really is how you say it. Be very careful with the written word. I talk about the sandwich approach, but keep your texts and your emails brief and friendly, especially high conflict people. The more stuff you write in there, the more they have to pick apart. So say, gosh, I appreciate you sharing all your concerns. Let's talk about this at the next available time. Or my response is that, this is I can see how this is important to you. This is important to me. Let's talk about this. Now, I work with a lot of co-parents on how to respond to exes, and that's a little bit of a different matter, but it's pretty much the same thing. You keep it brief. Well, we don't necessarily agree on this, but I can see that this is important to you, and I want to work this out. So the sandwich approach is you say something nice, you stick in what you need to say, and then you say something nice again. Thank you for sending me this. I don't know that if I can be there on the day that you asked me to, but I can see this is important to you, and I want to work this out. Do you see how I did that? I just kind of slipped that in there, okay? And these are all skills. These are just skills. And I wasn't very good at doing this either, so don't worry about it. Okay, reassure them. I want to help you accomplish your goal. I want to help you, blah, blah, blah. Show concern rather than anger. And I use this one a lot for all sorts of things. If I make a luncheon appointment with someone and they don't show up, I do not get mad. I've just learned. I will always say, oh my goodness, I hope you're okay, because I didn't see you there. I thought we had an appointment, but maybe I was wrong. I just want to make sure you're okay. Or if someone was supposed to send something to me, or if someone gets upset with me, gosh, I hate it that you're upset with me. I wasn't aware that this was a difficult topic for you. Please let's talk about this when you have some time. Now, this is not about like falling on my sword. I'm just showing empathy, attention, and respect. Like I'm not assuming I know or understand stuff. Express regret when you have to set limits. I'm sorry I can't be there today, but I hate it that I'm going to miss this, or I hate it that I'm not going to be able to help you the way I would like to. There's ways to say this stuff. And it's also okay to stop responding when it does become repetitive, because there are some people that do just want to fight, right? So if they've sent you an email and you've responded to it, I'm sorry I can't be there. Well, I don't understand why you can't be there, blah, blah, blah. Well, as I said before, I just had this other event and I can't be there. Well, if you've answered it 2 or 3 times, it is okay to say, gosh, I'm so sorry, I wish we could talk about this more, but I have to step into a meeting, or I have to go pick up my kids, or I have a doctor's appointment. Like, make up something, okay? It's okay. And then find other ways to say no rather than no. No is a big negative feedback. That doesn't work for me. I'm not able to. Okay. So steps to a strategy. So you do want to get more help if you still have a lot of triggers or negative thoughts and you can't get past them. Like every time you're dealing with this high conflict person, it makes you crazy. Like you just can't get past it. Or if you need additional support, and I am going to be happy to provide you some resources, or if you have such deep hurt or grievance, anger, that would be something that you would need to work on. And I am going to be starting a new group, I think, on working with people that make you crazy in your life. So that is something that I will be happy to let you know about. So these are kind of the things, and I do a lot of EMDR with people because I do find that when we have these grievances, when we have these hurts, when we have these triggers or negative thoughts, EMDR is really, really, really helpful. It's the quickest, fastest way to kind of, it's not that it takes it away, but it helps you to not have the same reaction to it. So it's a really wonderful tool. So with that, as far as strategies go, what I thought I would do very briefly, and I'll take a few questions, is talk just for a minute about some of the strategies. So one of the strategies is I had and these are kind of representative, it's not one person, but one example would be a step-parent who came to me, and they had just remarried a few years ago, and there was an adult child, an adult stepchild that they cared about, but this adult stepchild was always like getting into fights with them over text about things. And this person loved their husband, but couldn't, but just, was having lots of trouble because she'd get upset and then he'd get upset, and it was just a mess, right? And so basically we just talked about the high conflict cycle, we talked about the traits, we talked about what the pattern was, and so whenever she started getting texts, what we did was we just gave her a couple of sentences to use, because one of the big things was she was always like trying to respond right away and give answers right away. So we just stopped doing that. And so she would just say, I'm sorry, we can't respond right now. We're in the car, we're doing this, but this is important to us, and we're so glad you invited us to this, and we'll respond when we get home. And then she and her husband would go home, and they would talk about what they wanted to do and what was right for them. And then they would craft a very carefully worded note. And they just made a point of never giving her any negative feedback over text. It was always positive. Anytime they wanted to talk to her in a negative way, or if they had something where they had to say no, they would just always do it over the phone. And for whatever reason, it was just always better. And I've had a lot of people. I had one man come to me, once again, representative. Different people have come to me with partners, like people they're currently married to. I think my partner is a high conflict, and I would talk about the high conflict cycle and talk about using ear. And they would go home and say, that works. That ear thing works. And then they would usually could identify their spouse's danger. Well, I know my spouse did not get a lot of attention when she was growing up, or he didn't get a lot of affection, or he didn't get a lot of whatever. And just by using ear, it's much better. So this ear piece and just understanding it really does work. With exes and co-parents, I find that just keeping the written word brief and friendly has amazing abilities, but it's the same thing. We use these same strategies I talked about today. And then in the workplace, the big thing there is using that flexible thinking, managed emotions, moderate behaviors piece. Like you just have to not be defensive and just keep staying the course. But for heaven's sakes, don't go to HR and say, this person I'm working with is high conflict. Just go to HR, and you might say, I'm having trouble trying to figure out what to do. Can you help me? I know I'm a parenting coordinator facilitator. I attended a training, and they were talking about how they had a lot of people that come to HR and gripe. And don't do that, but just say, I'd like some assistance on what you think I might do here, right? Because you're going to be the reasonable person. Okay, so we have time for a few questions. So anybody want to ask a question? Just raise your hand. And I'm going to be down here at the end, and I'll stay for a bit if anybody wants to come down. So, okay. So this says argumentative and always right family member. Anybody have any of those? Antagonistic form of communicating and then gets angry because they have incited an argument. So probably whomever wrote this, hopefully you've gotten some ideas from today. So what I would tell you about someone who's argumentative and always right family member is what that tells me is this person has a need to feel right and validated. And what I would tell you is I would experiment with the next time you see them or are with them is to use that empathy, attention, and respect. Bob, it is so good to see you. How are you doing? I would give them lots of positive attention just to see what they would do with it. I would want you to be truthful. In terms of genuine, I would not want you to be fake with it. And just to see if what Bob is really wanting is attention and respect. And we all have the need to have attention and respect. Bill Eddy says that a lot of times the reason why high conflict people are high conflict is because they don't get attention and respect, and they don't know why. They don't have insight, remember? So sometimes if we can give them, then they are less argumentative. I do have some clients that talk about family members, like one family member that they all kind of stay away from, and then when they get together, the family member's always saying rude things. And so I was like, well, you really ought to just pay attention to that family member a little bit more. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, just call the family member like once a week and talk to them on the phone for 5 minutes and see how they're doing. And I bet they'll be nicer the next time you get together. And sure enough, they were much nicer. They just need a little bit of attention because they do things that make us not want to have anything to do with them. Does that make sense? So it's the opposite of what we feel like doing. And that's why, see, you're emotional. That's why you're mature, remember? It sucks to be mature, sorry. It's just hard. But you're experimenting. Do you see? And then if you can get Bob to understand you respect him and give him some attention, you may find that he's just fine or he's better. Or you talk with some of your other family members and you switch off. You switch off with Bob at the next family gathering, but have a plan. Have a plan. If I'm not in regular communication with this person, should I initiate it or wait for them? Sometimes it has been months or years since this person communicates with me. So what I would say to you is that there's this whole thing around the emotional bank account. And the emotional bank account is our emotional relationship with anybody. And I use this with parents about children and adult parents about adult children. And Stephen Covey is the one that really, I don't know how many of you remember Stephen Covey. He's a wonderful man. He talked about the emotional bank account. When we make deposits in someone's emotional bank account, we say positive things to them. We show them empathy, attention, respect. We give them positive nonverbals. We make withdrawals by giving them negative feedback. We make withdrawals by our nonverbals. I talk with dads about not furrowing their brow. I talk with mothers about not rolling their eyes or doing that thing that mothers do, that little, But the point is, so if there's someone that you haven't been in contact with and you want to be in contact with them, it's okay to send them a text or to call them and say, just checking in to see how you're doing, right? You're paying attention to them. You're important to me. I want to make sure you're okay. That's a deposit. But when you make a withdrawal, another way we make withdrawals, though, is to give comments or advice when it's not wanted or needed. So sometimes I work with adult parents who have estranged relationships with their adult children. And one of the things we talk about is the commenting, the giving advice, the telling your adult children what to do. That's considered a withdrawal often. And so the problem with these withdrawals in the emotional bank account is it's not one withdrawal takes out one deposit. It's one withdrawal takes out 5 deposits. And so before long, you're at a negative balance. So if you want to initiate or create a bridge with somebody, make those deposits. Just send a note every few weeks or every week or so, a nice text. How are you doing? I hope you're well. Call them. Just make some deposits. If you've got a teenager in your life and they're making you crazy and you're having trouble with them because you've got a low emotional bank account. And I work with step parents on this. Tell your step kid, gosh, you're doing a great job. I can see your grades are really good, or I'm really proud of you. I know I've been cranky lately. I mean, I've seen relationships completely turn around in a very short period of time just by minding the emotional bank account that you have with other people.